Welcome to this lesson on volume of prisms. Today we're going to talk about what is the volume and how to find the volume. So first of all, we need to understand a couple of different vocabulary terms. We have cubic unit. A cubic unit is a cube with edges that are 1 centimeter long. So in this case, if you're to draw a cube, this is a very rough sketch. Okay, and this is 1 centimeter, this is 1 centimeter, and the height is 1 centimeter. All right, so that is a cubic unit. When we talk about volume, we talk about, okay, well, if we were to take these cubes and put them into the container, how many of them would fit in there? So volume is the number of cubic units needed to fill the space inside of a figure. So right here you have the area, so that's how many of the bases, so like the base of the cubic unit, how many of those could you lay down flat in the area? And then if you talk volume, now you start to build up. Now you start to fill it. Say, okay, well, I can fit these many, so if I have a 2x4 area, and then now all of a sudden I go up 1, I have a volume of 8. I can fit 8 cubic units in this figure. Right, so volume is when we're filling something. You kind of have to imagine that you're taking those little blocks and filling it with the little blocks, but that they're actually kind of moldable, because not everything is, has these perfect edges like this. Think of like a glass or a cup. They're not going to fit in there perfectly, so you have to take pieces of them and fill them in where you can. Right? So this is just an idea, and this is where the cubic units come from. And again, it's because we're doing base times height times depth. So you have 1, 2, 3 dimensions. So you have, let's say, just inches. So inches times inches times inches. And that's where you get the inches cubed, or cubic inches. All right, so the volume of a rectangular prism. So when you're doing the volume of prisms, the general formula is volume, V, equals area times height. And we're actually going to change height to, we're going to use depth, because we've talked about it a little bit differently. Like, a pool, we don't say what's the height of the pool, we say what's the depth of the pool. And that's going to help us with any confusion. So volume, and you should write it out in words, equals area times depth. So now what we have to remember is, if we're working with a rectangular prism, you're finding the area of the base. Okay, so the base of a rectangular prism is a rectangle, and we know that to find the area, we do base times height. So what we actually end up doing is we end up replacing the area part of it with your B times H. Okay, and you get base times height times, and we'll put D for depth, so we know the difference. So we're talking about how tall or how deep that figure would go if you put it underground. So you find the area, and then you multiply it by the depth. So you can also look at it this way. How many times can you take your base and put it into that container? So how many bases, so if it's, if the area is 5 by 6 and all of a sudden it's, 10 inches tall, well, you have this area of 30 square inches, and how many of those can you fit? Well, you can fit 10 of them because it's 10 inches. So how much is that? Well, that's 300, because you're taking it and you're saying, okay, well, here's this 5 by 6, and I want to go 10 inches high, so I'm just going to keep putting in a 5 by 6, a 5 by 6, a 5 by 6, a 5 by 6. So 30, 30, 30, 30, all the way up to 10, and you know that 30 times 10 gives you 300. So that's kind of another way to look at it as well. So here, again, you want to find the volume, and we know that volume equals the area times the depth. And it's rectangular, and my base, So in this case, this one is my base because it's the ones that are parallel and congruent. Because remember, these aren't parallel. The ones along the edge, they're not parallel. They touch each other. Okay, so this one is going to be my base. Yes, this could be parallel with the one over here, but since there's 4 of them that are equal, that's not my base. So the area of my base is 4 times 3 2/10. So that's what's getting put in for my area. And then my depth, it goes 10.5 inches deep. Okay, so I can do the multiplication. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 3 is 12. Place my decimal, because I have a decimal here, times 10.5. In the effort to save us some time, I am going to go ahead and grab my calculator. 12 8/10 times 10 5/10. And I get 134 4/10. And now remember, this is how many dimensions? So you have base, height, and depth. So it's 3 dimensions, and it's volume, so we know that it's inches cubed or cubic inches. So remember the 3, when we talk about volume, the 3 is always cubed. Right? And it's cubed because of cubic units. Okay, because a cube has to have all 3 dimensions the same length, so that's why we call it a cube, and that's why we call this cubic units. Okay, now if you have a triangular prism, what changes is the fact that your area is different. So the base of a triangular prism is a triangle, and the area of that triangle is half times the base times the height. So we're actually going to replace this with volume equals the area of the triangle times the depth. We know that we replace area with the 1/2 times base times height, and we end up with volume equals 1/2 base times height times the depth. Okay, now the beautiful thing is, I don't have to put this in parentheses. The only reason that I do is to show that all of this replaced A. Okay, because A stood for area. So if you want to have that reminder, area and depth. And then we replace the area with its formula, and for a triangle, the formula is half times base times height. Right, so in this case, we have a triangular prism. I know this looks like a pyramid, but imagine it actually looks like this. So here's the triangle. Okay, I'll draw it a little nicer for you. Okay, so here is your 6, and this is your 8, and this is your 5. All right, so in this case, we're looking for the volume equals 1/2 the base times the height, which is 6 because it's the triangle that we're doing first, times the depth, which is 8. So I'm going to take half of 30 because that's easier, and that gives me 15 times 8. I know 8 times 10 is 80. 8 times 5 is 40, so I get 120. So I know the volume of this triangular prism is 120 cubic inches. Okay, so you have a couple of problems here that you are going to try on your own. You have this rectangular prism and this triangular prism. I'd like you to try them on your own. As always, if you have any questions, please be sure to write them down or email me so we can go over them in class.